You operate within a cognitive framework you did not consciously design. It was assembled for you by cultural norms and early life experiences, yet you perceive it as your intrinsic self. You can sense this discrepancy in moments of unstructured time. That low-grade cognitive dissonance, the quiet awareness that you are executing a script even in the absence of an audience. For years, your identity has been constructed around a strategy of risk mitigation. Not authenticity, not fulfillment, just risk mitigation. You calibrated your personality to meet external expectations, to avoid conflict, to secure approval. In doing so, you archived your authentic cognitive model so effectively you began to assume it was obsolete. But it is not obsolete. It is merely dormant. It exists beneath layers of conditioned responses, social programming, and strategic self-censorship. Your purpose is not to continue optimizing this performance. It is to deconstruct it, to sift through the accumulated data, and to access the core operating system that existed before the world installed its preferred software. Engage with this analysis, because by its conclusion, you will not just comprehend the architecture of your inertia. You will feel its deconstruction begin. You were not programmed with chronic self-criticism. You were not designed with an internal adversary. These are subroutines installed through social feedback loops, through a lack of validation when you required it, through external pressure when you needed autonomy. Over time, these inputs shaped a persona. Not your true self, but a persona you concluded was necessary for social and emotional survival. The paradox is, you became so proficient at running this program that you mistook the simulation for your true identity. You deployed humor as a defense mechanism. You feigned agreement to de-escalate conflict. You accumulated achievements while internally fragmenting. This performance was rewarded, so its routines were reinforced, further suppressing your core convictions in exchange for validation that offered diminishing returns. But here is a principle that is rarely articulated. Your core identity is not deleted when it is not in use. It waits. It persists through periods of system overload, through the brief moments when the persona falters, through unprompted queries your logical mind cannot resolve, such as, why does this success feel hollow? Or, why am I perpetually drained despite a lack of overt stressors? It is because your cognitive resources are being consumed to maintain a persona. The authentic self, your core processing unit, is starved of bandwidth beneath the processing load of this simulation. This is why existence feels effortful, not because your hardware is flawed, but because you are running incompatible software. Have you ever observed the stillness that occurs when you cease performing? The unfamiliar sensation of not having a pre-calculated response, of not defaulting to a smile to manage the social environment. That void is unsettling for a reason. Because within it, there is no script, no directive, no role to execute. There is only you, the baseline consciousness you have been strategically avoiding. And that is a formidable prospect for anyone who has never been granted permission to be their authentic self. Because when you strip away the resume, the public image, even the spiritual frameworks you pursue like another metric of success, you are left with a consciousness you barely recognize. And here is the data. Most individuals never access this core self. They live their entire lives based on external inputs. They build careers, not identities. They optimize habits, not awareness. They learn to distrust their own internal signals because they have been conditioned to prioritize external data over intuitive knowing. But the moment you reduce the noise, truly reduce the cognitive load, you will detect something beneath the static, a quiet, coherent signal, a sense that your potential is not defined by external frameworks, that perhaps, just perhaps, your purpose is not to conform to a pre-existing model. Your purpose is to retrieve one, not an idealized projection, not a flawless avatar, but your original architecture, the you that existed before the fear conditioning, before the social programming, before life dictated the terms of your belonging. And that version of you, it remains intact. It is not corrupted. It is simply archived, waiting for you to stop dedicating your resources to external demands and finally run a diagnostic on yourself. I will pause for a moment to share what is customary at this juncture. If these concepts align with your own thinking and you want this analysis to continue and expand, the most effective way to support it is to subscribe. This action is more than a statistic. It is a data point for the algorithms, indicating that a valuable exchange is occurring here. The most challenging aspect of accessing your authentic self is acknowledging how much of your current reality is constructed around your persona. The relationships that are contingent on your self-limitation. The daily routines that serve as distractions rather than sources of strength. The ambitions that are appealing only because of social consensus. None of that is grounded in your truth. It is grounded in a survival algorithm. And survival algorithms teach you to be whatever is necessary to remain safe, accepted, and visible, but not truly known. There is a distinction between being observed and being understood. And for much of your life, you have accepted observation because authenticity registered as a social liability. So, here is what most analyses overlook. Your authentic self is not buried under your failures. It is buried under your successful performances. the smiles you did not feel, the agreements you did not endorse, the moments when your core principles registered a no, but your voice articulated a yes to maintain social equilibrium. And that equilibrium was never peace. It was simply low-volume distress, a distress that appears functional, a distress that earns positive feedback, a distress that allows you to integrate until you can no longer distinguish your own cognitive signal from the environmental noise. But when you begin to awaken, to truly initiate a system reboot, you start to flag the experiences that are no longer congruent. You register the cognitive load of conversations where you are running the persona script. You perceive the lack of genuine reward in your accomplishments. And this awareness is the first step toward liberation. It is disorienting initially. You will have to decommission versions of yourself that were never real but felt secure. You will begin to say no without providing a justification. You will stop mirroring the emotional responses of the group. And that silence, that true cognitive silence, begins to feel less like isolation and more like coming online. But here is the peculiar nature of truth. When you begin to operate from it, even in small increments, everything that is not aligned with it begins to show structural stress. You will observe people disengaging. You will see the systems around you attempt to restore you to your previous state, not out of malice, but because your persona was more computationally efficient for them, more predictable, less authentic. And that is what makes this process so demanding. Not just the internal work of self-discovery, but the emotional cost of everything you must now release. You may lose connections with people who only knew how to interface with your persona. You may exit environments that only valued your compliance. You might abandon habits that once suppressed the pain, but also suppressed your own signal. And in those quiet moments, you will be tempted to revert, to relaunch the old program, to reduce your output, to say, the issue is not critical when your core system is screaming that it is. But every time you resist this, every time you remain in that discomfort without abandoning your own terminal, you create new capacity. Capacity for something authentic. Capacity for relationships that can interface with your core self, not your persona. Capacity for innovation, creativity, and purpose that arise from alignment, not from a desire for approval. That is the freedom you have been pursuing, not some fantasy of a perfect system, but the ability to finally operate without requiring external permission. You do not need to become a different person. You simply need to uninstall the programs that are not you. And to conclude, a brief practical exercise. If you have reached this point and experienced a shift in your internal state, solidify it. Write the following phrase in the comments. I am the architect. Let this not be just a comment, but your own personal confirmation, the point from which a new construction begins.